No one hit as many high and low points during a 40-year life as Pete Maravich. I wanted to make this film because I remember what a sensation Pete Maravich was. The floppy socks, the Beatle haircut, and the behind-the-back passes. But the central question of the film is, did the joy and exuberance of his life override the tragedy and the heartbreak?
In the half-light of the morning, in a far corner of the LSU campus, sits an unlikely basketball shrine. The old Ag Center, a forgotten relic, crumbling and rusting with each passing day. If you close your eyes and drift back, you can hear the cheers of another time. A time when so many lives were touched. Like that night when Oscar Robertson's all-time scoring record fell.
You know what Fritz Maravich has to tell his kids to feed Maravich and feed the kid.
And while the old barn may be forgotten, the mythical career of Pistol Pete Maravich lives on in the hearts of those who love the game.
Here they come again. 93-76. LSU leading. It's the Pete, a 21-footer. Such an ovation in all your life. The whole team runs out on the floor. They hoist Maravich to their shoulders. There must be 40 cameramen out there shooting his pictures. Police all over the floor. And the crowd is starting a rhythmic chant of Pete, Pete, Pete. Listen to this. The crowd is wild.
His story is so beyond basketball. It's success, it's failure, it's addiction, it's redemption.
He did what he was supposed to do. He did what he was designed to do. He changed the game.
I can promise you there will never be another Pete Maravich. There never will be.
In the spring of 1966, Press Maravich, known for his innovative thinking, took over coaching duties at Louisiana State University. A school with little basketball tradition, poor facilities, and a passion for football. But he had a secret weapon with him, his son.
The first press conference I took him to in New Orleans, he said, "Wait till you see my boy." He's the best basketball player in the country.
He's going to be the best basketball player ever. He's going to be the first $1 million contract player in the NBA.
I was a sophomore that year, and most of us didn't really, know who Pete was. We knew we had a new coach. We got back to school, and we went out, and freshmen were scrimmaging. There was this tall, skinny guy, 6'5", and probably 150, 60 pounds, and everybody said, "Oh, that's not him." So we got in games, and started playing against him. Man, this guy can do some stuff.
December rolled around, and the freshman team were in action, and the varsity was horrible. Nobody went to see the varsity. A friend of mine came up to me, and he said, "You've got to go to the freshman basketball games. There's a guy out there scoring 40 points a game."
A few games in, all of a sudden the place was packed for the freshman game.
And when the varsity would take the court, everybody left.
This coming season scares the hell out of me. This is the worst basketball situation I know I have ever faced. Ever.
Les Robinson was an assistant for Press at NC State and remained one of his closest friends the rest of his life. The two corresponded often throughout the years. Fritz Maravich said years later that his first year coaching LSU was his toughest season ever. But the LSU freshman team, led by Pete, made the Ag Center a happening, a party, and a place to be seen. By the end of his first year, attendance for freshman games soared to a capacity of 8,500 people. Maravich averaged over 43 points a game, leading the Baby Bengals to a perfect season, until the last game versus Tennessee, when Pete missed a tying free throw in the dying seconds. Distraught, he disappeared after the game. He had walked 2 miles back to the team's hotel. Pete Maravich spent his early childhood in West Virginia and then Aliquippa, Pennsylvania, where his father coached the local high school. Press had been a star player in town before a stellar career at Davis and Elkins College, and finally, professional basketball. It was a way to avoid the grim existence of working in the mill.
Basketball was his salvation. He finds something that gives his life meaning, exuberance, joy, and Press becomes obsessed. Later on, he decides, I'm going to give my biological son to basketball. I am going to build the perfect player.
When I was 7 years old, my dad said, Pete, if you'll listen to me, you might be able to get a scholarship in basketball because we can't pay your way. And maybe you not only get a scholarship, but maybe you'll go to the pro level and you'll make $1 million playing basketball. And I said, Dad, that's what I want.
So the dream was set in motion, a father and a son, and the shared love of basketball.
I think he lived through his father. Press knew what he wanted. Pete knew what Press wanted. And Pete was trying to fulfill those dreams.
Building a goal in the back of my yard, he came over and he asked me for a shot. He said, looks easy. He'd missed the basket completely. He said, why didn't mine go in? I said, well, because you can't beat the old man.
Press started his son dribbling upstairs, and soon he was doing it blindfolded. When the Maravich family left Aliquippa for Press to accept the head job at Clemson in 1956, homework basketball began.
He devised and created homework basketball thing from shooting, passing, ball handling. Pete got it. Pete became obsessed with basketball.
Nobody really understands except his father how many hours he truly put in to become Pistol Pete.
Press would drive the car around town at Clemson, and Pete would dribble the ball out the window of the car. Pete goes to the movie, and he's sitting in the aisle seat dribbling the ball before they ask him to leave.
Sunday afternoon, they go to church, take him to the gym at 1 o'clock, lock the door, come back and get Pete at like 6 or 7 that night, right in that gym by himself. He'd take a piece of chalk and draw a circle on the wall.
He was behind the back, trying to hit the bullseye in that spot on the wall.
Left hand, right hand, then off the dribble.
After winning an ACC championship with Clemson, Press's star was rising. In 1964, Press moved his family to Raleigh, North Carolina, where he became the head coach at NC State. Pete was entering his junior year at Broughton High School.
And I remember going over to practice. It was this skinny kid out there, and I said, I can't beat him.
And he started throwing the ball behind his back and between his legs and everything. I said, my Lord, honey, this is going to be fun.
When we first got there, I was beginning to hear about Pete showing up at the YMCA. And my brother, Jimmy, and Pete would allow each other to shoot foul shots until they missed.
Pete says, when I miss one, we'll go home.
Jimmy would shoot and make 10 or 12, and Pete got up there, he had 178.
I think he missed on purpose so I could go home.
He didn't care about anything else. He didn't do his homework. He didn't care about his grades.
No one else would leave practice and go to NC State and practice with the college team over there.
Years later, when they had the last game in Reynolds, one reporter said, "You've seen a lot of performances there as a player, as a coach. What's the greatest performance you ever saw there?" I didn't blink an eye. I said, "It's December 1964.
It was Christmas break, and Pete, still in high school, joined 4 NC State players for pickup. The teams were switched often to help the state players. A team that would win the ACC season tournament that year was humiliated.
I mean, hook shots, jump shots, nobody could guard him. His team won every time. He finishes up hitting a hook shot and called it going down. We went over and just sat down, nobody in the Coliseum, and Pete Coker looks at me and he said, "I've never seen anything like this."
On the basketball court, he was in his element. But off the basketball court, we went in, he was right behind me.
Pete was very shy. He was meek.
Timid, quiet, to himself.
I was living in the summertime with some buddies of mine. Pete would come over to our apartment, and he'd stay over there. He'd sleep on the couch a lot.
Bob Sanford, despite being 2 years older, was Pete's closest friend throughout his life.
Press would call periodically. "Is Pete there?" I said, "Yes, sir." He'd say, "Bob, don't let that boy get in any trouble." Press was very much concerned about girls and alcohol.
Press was wary of anything that might come in conflict with Pete's basketball greatness. And on one occasion, Press gave him a black eye when he came home with alcohol on his breath.
Press always seemed like a Russian colonel in the KGB. He was the toughest man you've ever seen in your life. You would avert your eyes. You wouldn't look at Press. He was so imposing.
In Maravich's junior year, a stacked Broughton team fell short of winning a championship. In the following season, Pete carried the scoring load on a weak team, punctuating his year with a 42-point binge in the North Carolina East-West All-Star Game. While Maravich was beginning to live up to his father's expectations on the court, it was a different story in the classroom. His SAT scores were subpar, so he went to prep school for a year. Pete was determined to go to West Virginia, but Press accepted the head coaching job at LSU.
Press won the ACC championship. LSU came along and they said, "We'll hire you and we'll get Pete in school."
I remember him talking to him on the phone. He's making more money, he said, "But I've got the house payment." He said, 2 car payments. And I said, 2 car payments? He says, "Yeah, I got one for Pete."
There was a bond there that the father's dream and the son's dream was to satisfy each other.
Ow! Get up again. Who fouled up there for heaven's sake?
But I never could put my finger on what was bothering Pete. Something in his life was troubling him.
I'll tell people that, you know, with all the stardom that Pete had, he lived a very sad life. He handled it very well at times. Sometimes he didn't handle it too well. It was a tough life.
Pete Maravich had a mischievous streak, and one summer during college, he and his friend, Bob Sanford, decided to take a road trip.
We were walking down to the carnival. This guy's got this basketball goal and rig set up. He's got all these bears hanging up there. So Pete sees it, and he said, let's have some fun. And the guy says, $1, if you make 2, you get a big bear. Pete said, Bob, I'm gonna try it. So Pete shoots the first time, he misses. And then he shoots the second time. And Pete says, I won. The guy said, no, you didn't win. He said, what do you mean I didn't win? He said, you gotta hit 2 in a row. And he said, oh, okay, I'm gonna try it again. He said, did I win? The guy said, yeah, reach it up. I mean, these bears are great big bears. He hands it to me. He said, give me $1, Bob, I'm gonna try it again. I said, all right. He hits 2 more in a row. That's another bear. I'm gonna try it again. And the guy said, whoa, 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 whoa. By this time, there's 20, 25 people gathering around the boardwalk now. People say, oh, what's wrong, man? Let the guy shoot. And so the guy said, okay. So I give him another $1. 2 more, bam, bam. Said, no, man, you ain't shooting anymore. Pete goes out into the crowd. How about if I shoot from back here? And the guy said, oh, yeah, you can shoot from back there. So that means he had to shoot over the wooden structure. First shot, bam, knocks the bottom out of it. They bring it back to him, and as soon as he catches it, he starts doing all these spinning, bouncing it off his hand, his head, and all this stuff, rolling it down his arms and stuff. He take that thing, drilled about twice. The guy said, you are not shooting again if you go out in the ocean. And I just said, you just been had by Pistol Pete.
After averaging over 43.6 points a game as a freshman at LSU, Maravich was ready to revive the varsity program as he started his sophomore year in the fall of 1967.
I feel like if we can go out there and put on a show and also win the basketball game, that it's just great for the game, and it's great for the fans, and it's great for the team.
Showtime. He had almost extrasensory perception. He had eyes in back of his head.
The game would slow down for him. He could see things that other guys could not see on the floor. It was a beautiful thing to watch.
The fancy passes and the fancy dribbling between the legs and behind the back passes and everything, he made that into a routine daily thing. The governor on down, everybody loved Pistol Pete.
He turned the governor on to basketball. So the new facilities priority was moved up.
Every arena we played in was already sold out. All the marquees had Pistol Pete is in town.
Everybody was there to see Pete. I mean, $2 tickets are going for $25, $30.
Now, I read here every once in a while where you're quite a catch on the campus too, Pete. Being a basketball star and big, tall, good-looking.
Oh, I don't know if I want to talk about that too much, but everybody gets out once in a while. I also get a chance to get out once in a while.
Pete met the love of his life at a local bar near LSU.
I was in a nightclub with a friend of mine, and he came in and saw me and called my friend up and asked him if he would call me to go out with him. And I said, no, I don't know who he is. Well, then my friend called me back up and said, just do it as a favor to me. It's Pistol Pete. Our first date was at an LSU football game. When we left, we actually went to a Catholic church there on the grounds at LSU, and we were talking or whatever, and we heard a tap on the glass, and it was a priest, and I rolled the window down, and I said, we're just sitting here talking. He says, I don't have time for confessions. He said, just get on down the road.
The single source of love and sanity in his life is Jackie. He meets her at a bar, and she doesn't even know he's a ball player.
It really didn't matter to me because I was attracted to Pete the person. He was real loyal to his friends, his fans, and his teammates.
Pete and his father, Press, remained focused on X's and O's, analyzing and dissecting games. But sometimes, in the heat of the moment, personalities clashed.
I'll never forget the timeout where Coach Maravich was diagramming a play and said, this is what we're going to do.
And I was looking at this play, and I just couldn't see it working. I said, look, this isn't going to work.
Press wrapped him with his knuckles.
He said, I'm the coach, you're the player, you're going to do what I say we're going to do.
In front of 11,000 people, I was sort of embarrassed at this, and so I didn't say much, and we went out, and it turned out to win the ball game for us.
Pete averaged 43.8 points his sophomore year, and the team finished 14-12. He hit for 44.2 points his junior season, but the team fell to 13 wins and 13 losses.
Coach Maravich wasn't Coach Maravich when he went to LSU. He went from being a coach to a father and obsessed with his son. He was all about coaching pistol. He changed how he coached. He loved his son too much.
It was like a science experiment gone mad, and the coach gets a taste of scoring, and he can't lay off.
Press saw his dream come true, so he became more of a fan than a coach.
In a team meeting, he said that Pete had to shoot 40 times a game or we couldn't win. Looking at the team, you know, I could tell a lot of the guys got down on that. Pete didn't like that either.
I believe my dad said that I would have to shoot 40 times a game for us to win. Whether this is true or not, we really don't know.
Pete was wanting to be more of the team player, but Press said, look, we're here to put people in the seats.
Everyone's playing a role. Press is the father coach. Pete's the floppy-haired virtuoso. What's really happening is that those performances are camouflaging the pain and the suffering that's happening behind closed doors.
Pete's mom, Helen, had depression issues that started back in North Carolina and grew worse in Baton Rouge, so much so that Press no longer allowed her to come to the arena.
She had a problem with alcohol and had bouts of depression, had shock treatments.
Press was always gone, and she really didn't know anyone there. She felt very isolated.
Halfway through Pete's senior year at LSU, January 31st, 1970,
A 21-footer.
Pete's mother wanted to be there to witness history.
The night that he broke Oscar Robertson's record, I came out of the dressing room from the press conference, and there was nobody around except these 2 or 3 ladies. And one of the ladies says, oh, don't take my picture, take Miss Maravich. I looked at her and I said, are you Mrs. Maravich? And she said, yeah, that's me. I'd never seen her before.
Press was limited in his recruiting because of his home situation. He was afraid to leave the house.
My wife has been pretty sick, Les. Geez, I'll get drunk when she gets well. Must do home chores, feed, clean, do dishes, even doing a poor job coaching because of the situation.
It was a burden on him. I don't think he ever got a good night's sleep. And then all of a sudden, he's got a team and a player in the national limelight.
The greater the attention on Pete and Press, the more Helen recedes, the darker she becomes, the hallucinations, the alcohol.
I'd come pick Pete up sometime, and he'd come to the car, get out of here, let's go, 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 go. What's wrong? He said, just get out of here. You know, she was out of control.
I don't think Pete ever articulated the pain that he felt.
What the fans misunderstand, inevitably, watching through television or even, you know, at the Ag Center, is they're mistaking the joy that Pete gives them for his own joy. His own joy was fleeting. It was in the moment. It's when he hits the 30-foot hook shot. The fans' joy is not, which is why we're still talking about him half a century later.
Well, this is going to be a rather difficult combination, playing basketball for your dad with the limelight that's bound to settle on you. Do you think much about that?
Well, I try not to think about it, because if I start thinking about it, I start getting nervous.
What Pete created was like a Beatlemania for basketball in the South. He scored 44.2 points per game. The crazy thing is that was not the most mesmerizing part of Pete Maravich. It was more the dribbling and the passing. So you had this guy who was playing like a Harlem Globetrotter in a real game with real competition. This wasn't the Washington Generals.
Everywhere we played, he had the pressure of you're averaging 44 points a game. Are you going to get 44 tonight? You got to break this Coliseum record.
I mean, not only, you know, would you be scoring those many points, you were carrying the team, and you better be winning.
There was a pressure that he added to the equation. The pressure of having Sports Illustrated follow you around all week. I don't think he bargained for that.
Well, it's sort of like a rock star, and like Elvis Presley, where he can't go to the grocery store. His senior year, they let him move out of the jock dorm because all the other athletes were bugging him for autographs. They wanted to come in and arm wrestle. Everybody wanted a piece of Pistol Pete.
Somebody always wanting to know this, wanting to know that, and after a while, it's the same questions. About his floppy socks, his hair. Pete got tired of it.
Maravich's senior year, the Tigers finished 22-10. At LSU, Pete was a three-time All-America, set 12 NCAA records, and hit for more than 50 points 28 times. And of course, there was the all-time scoring record. But behind the numbers was a story about a father and a son, and their lifelong dedication to basketball.
Pete changed the game, and that record changes the game. Press is looking from the stands, and what he now knows is that not just Pete was in the record book for all time, presumably, but Press as well.
We are most happy to announce that Pete Maravich will play professional basketball for the Atlanta Hawks.
Going from LSU to the Hawks was about the worst possible place he could go. A really good, predominantly black veteran team, and all of a sudden, you throw a virtuoso, good-looking white kid who is going to sell NBA basketball in the South. You have a recipe for disaster.
Pete was put on there to be a savior. There's going to be some discontent from some of the black ball players. Guys think they should have got more money.
We got a contract for $1.5 million, plus a car, an apartment. They were making about $40, $50, maybe $60,000 a year. And we're struggling with management even to get that kind of contract.
You can't see it, but you know it's there. You're using tight control. Bye-bye, Vitalis.
And on top of that, he started getting endorsements. He got a Vitalis commercial.
How am I doing?
Stick to basketball.
He got $150,000 for that before he ever played a game of basketball.
He was saddled with white expectation and black resentment.
Most athletes are cliquish. If you just stay with your little clique all the time and you listen to the chirping and the rumors, you don't get to know a guy.
He tried to be just one of the guys, and sometimes he would take several Hawk players and buy their dinner or whatever, and it seemed like no matter what he did, it was like, okay, Pistol Pete, you got the big contract, so you can afford to buy all these meals. You think you're doing us a favor, you're really not.
My dad was in Houston for business and walked into a restaurant, and the Atlanta Hawks were there. The team is spread out, all sitting at tables and booths and so forth. And over here in the corner was Pete, sitting by himself.
The Hawks never won a playoff series in Pete's 4 seasons, but he was an All-Star in 1973 and 1974.
Instead of doing exactly what his NBA coach wanted him to do, he would refer back to his dad and ask his dad, you know, do you think we're doing the right thing or the wrong thing or whatever? I think that hurt Pistol Pete in his NBA career, I really do.
Pete was a winner, right? He always wanted to win, and when you lose, that eats at you.
Maravich currently leads a lonely life of frustration. Several weeks ago, the Pistol had a shootout with mononucleosis.
When he was in Atlanta, he got mono. Then he got Bell's palsy twice, where his face was paralyzed on one side. I know stress has a lot to do with it.
Pres Maravich lasted 2 more years at LSU before he was fired. But the records were set, and the House of Maravich was built.
When Pete left LSU to go to the pros, there was a void. He didn't have the Pistol Pete to work with the next year and the year after that.
Pres moved on to Appalachian State in 1972, where after 2 losing seasons, his wife, Helen, who had struggled for years with depression and alcoholism, committed suicide. After being traded from the Hawks 5 months earlier, Pete was 1 week away from his first regular season game with the New Orleans Jazz.
Pete disappeared. The players had to go find him. They found him in the French Quarter at a bar, drinking.
The Jazz won just 23 times that season. The game no longer seemed fun anymore.
I don't really think I enjoy playing basketball as much as I did when I was a kid, because when you're a kid, you have no pressures and everything's fun to you. The game of pro basketball has so much pressure in it.
He never really has the talent around him. But more important than that, wherever he went, he was the show. He was supposed to not just play the game, but sell the game.
He would actually wait about 1.5 hours to 2 hours after the games until the news people left. So He wouldn't have to answer questions.
He would play, come off the court. The second he came off the court, someone handed him a beer. Then he was taking a shower and he had another beer, and he, getting dressed, had another beer. Took the bus to the plane, get another beer. On the plane, drink more beer. He became an alcoholic.
When there was something awful in his life, that became a way for him to retreat.
His second season in New Orleans, Pete Maravich averaged 26 points a game. And the following season, electrified the home crowd, going on a scoring binge versus the New York Knicks.
The fans cheering for Pete. The pistol firing for 56 points. Here goes the pistol. He'll let it fly and scores again. 65 for the pistol. Aaron James inside. Pistol doing it all. 68 for Maravich.
There's a moment with the Jazz where he's playing for a brief period as the best player in the game, the most unstoppable force.
Pete led the NBA in scoring that season with just over 31 points a game. And then he continued to dominate into the following year, when fate intervened on the last day of January, 1978.
They had just won 8 games in a row. They were on their way to the playoffs. They were up on Buffalo. And Pete threw a behind the back, through the legs, bounced past to Aaron James, but came down weird on his knee and tore the cartilage. In a way, was never the same.
2 years later, after sitting for much of the season with injuries, Maravich was waived by the Jazz. The Celtics picked him up, and he averaged 12 points a game coming off the bench.
The fact he wasn't a starter hurt his ego. He called his coach, Bill Fitch, and just said, I think I've shot one too many baskets.
I just quit. I walked away from it. I just got tired of it all. I just got tired of it. I got tired of my life.
He finished his career with a 24.1 average as a 5-time All-Star and was named one of the NBA's 50 greatest players.
Maravich's NBA career absolutely solidified his LSU exploits. The fact that Pete Maravich was able to lead the NBA in scoring as well as college, that's only been done 4 times. And it's only been done once since Pete Maravich, and that was Steph Curry.
Despite not winning a championship with LSU, despite never leading the Jazz to the playoffs, his name lives on in the Bayou country.
Pistol Pete Maravich.
For the Jazz.
Yeah, the biggest legend here in the city.
But we love Pistol Pete now here.
Oh, man, he was a show.
Pistol Pete.
Yeah, love for the game of basketball. He played like a black dude. He played like one of us.
He was like the guy you grew up with on the streets of New York in the playgrounds. He just happened to be white.
I'd like to think his style wasn't black or white. In fact, it was his style. He wasn't trying to copy anyone.
In 1980, I quit basketball. And I became a recluse for about 2 years. And so my wife used to come to me and she says, Pete, you really need to go see someone because you're really flipping out. I said, what do you mean? She says, you haven't left this house in 2 weeks. I said, yeah, I have. I go out to the garage and stuff.
The early 1980s marked a difficult time for Pete Maravich. There were even suicidal thoughts. Pete had dribbled in the rain, locked himself in gyms, and practiced with a maniacal ferocity. He had to wonder, looking back, had it been all worth it?
He'd gotten very paranoid and thought everybody was wanting a piece of him.
During a restless night of sleep, he heard a voice. From that moment on, Pete Maravich devoted his life to Christianity.
I said, oh God, you're gonna have to save me. I can't take this life anymore.
Philippians 4:13 was what he wrote under his autograph. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
He had a very obsessive personality. And once he focused in on something, whether it was later in life, that Bible and passages, or early in life with basketball, he learned everything there was to know about it.
During the summers, him and Press used to run basketball camps. When he came back, Press was diagnosed with bone cancer. From that time on, it was a deeper relationship.
I was with him every day and every night, doing 48-hour stretches without any sleep. Not only helping him minister to his physical needs, but also, I thought, to his spiritual needs.
Pete kept him in his home in a hospice situation. Pete would pick him up and give him his shots and carry him to the bed and carry him to the toilet and just do everything for his father.
In those moments where he's caring for his dad, they're joined in a way that they hadn't been. That's the moment of salvation. They both shake off the past. He's not a basketball android. At one moment, he's love. He's love.
Press Maravich died of cancer on April 15th, 1987, at the age of 71.
And at the hospital, when he passed away, Pete told him, I'll see you soon.
Just 8 months after his father's death, Pete was joined by his old Broughton High School teammates in Raleigh, North Carolina, for the retiring of his jersey. It was as if they never left.
It was so much of a part of our lives. I wouldn't miss this for anything.
And what struck me about him was how calm he was. He was very much at peace.
And he went around and shook our hands. I was the last one. And I patted him on the shoulder and said, love you, Pete. And I was crying, I had tears right now. He just didn't look right.
7 days later, January 5th, 1988, Pete Maravich died of heart failure at 40 after a pickup game of basketball. He collapsed on the floor after uttering his final words, "I feel great."
An American original died today, Pistol Pete Maravich. He was college basketball's all-time scoring champion and later a professional star.
What makes Pete Maravich's career almost mythical is when he died and they did an autopsy, they found out that he was missing a left artery in his heart and should have never lived to the age of 20.
No matter how majestic, unforgettable Pete's game was, people always recall his eyes. Even at the moments where he should be most ecstatic, there's a vulnerability and a pathos and a sensitivity, the sadness. And his children have the same eyes.
Pete may have found contentment in his last years, but his sons, Jason and Josh, are still grappling with his death and holding the memories dear as they inevitably fade.
We had a little team we played on called the Pistols that he helped coach. And he was always really supportive and was never one of these guys that was forcing it on us.
Whenever I would start watching basketball videos, one thing that attracted me most was spinning the ball. Within 30 minutes, I was switching fingers, switching hands. And it was funny because Jason's on the side of me and it's falling off.
Jason dropped in and out of basketball during his childhood, wondering if he was playing for himself or his dad.
I never felt 100% comfortable playing. I never could just have fun with it. I always felt like I had to, live up to certain standards. Before every game, I would always look in the stands, just imagining him sitting there.
Jason finished his career a two-time All-America in the NAIA.
In junior college, I was the second leading scorer in the nation. I had like 47 points in the game. An interview after the game, and the guy said, that would have been an average game for your dad. You hear that, it's kind of like, wow, can't win for anything, so.
They were talking about how great he was going to be like his dad. And, he was going to be a first-round draft. And I think when he saw that, that's when it started to really hit him. Do I want this life?
To this day at 35, I'm angry that I missed out on that relationship growing up without him.
Josh felt the pull of the Maravich name and walked on at LSU. He hardly played in the building named after his father, but he never quit.
I am not Josh Maravich. I'm Pistol Pete's kid. I'm Little Pistol. I'm still looking for my identity.
I tried to protect my sons, when they were younger. Sometimes I think I overprotected them. But I didn't want them hurt.
I'm haunted, I'm cursed, I've got a burden. I'm like physically, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically drained with this name.
My one regret is that my sons don't get to have the same. Sorry. I really regret them not having the same relationship with their dad as Pete had with his.
I went out to his grave one day to take pictures. And it was a beautiful, beautiful fall day. And it was just as quiet. And the first thing that struck me was the noise from the old cow palace and the cheers that we used to hear from those thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And here Pete lies in solitude.
I remember Pete telling me, when I die, nobody's going to remember me. Well, the legend lives on.
He averaged in 3 years at college 44.2 points a game with no shot clock and no three-point line. Try to break Pete's record. All you have to do is every game you play, you must score 15 three-pointers.
It stood longer than Babe Ruth's home run record.
You see what he did to the game, not just the records, but aesthetically. That stuff stays forever. The idea that he would be a better, more functional player in today's NBA than he was when he was drafted is a measure of just how far ahead of the game he was. He was a half a century ahead.
The whole team runs out on the floor. They hoist Maravich to their shoulders.
Beyond the records, the family issues, and all the heartbreak,
And the crowd is starting a rhythm and chant of Pete, Pete, Pete. Listen to this.
What most remember is the joy, the exuberance, the show, and that they had been a part of it.